Well, good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. Anybody forget it's Valentine's Day? No? Okay. It's Sunday, so that's nice. I mean, if you did forget, if you're a guy, just say after church, hey, I think you should take a nap, just like relax, and then go to the store and buy something. That's how that works. Or pray your little raffle ticket gets called right after church, and then you got date night. So anyway, thank you guys for being here today. Before we jump into our passage, I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who came out yesterday for our community garden work day, and to see some pictures behind me. Yeah, that. We had a great time, and we've been doing these continually. You're seeing some progress be out there. That was a dirt field, and then slowly God is bringing some stuff up, being faithful, and like it's awesome to see what's happening. And yesterday, we painted a cinder block wall white. Pretty exciting, right? And maybe you got to church and you're like, who cares? Why do we have like a white wall? That doesn't seem exciting at all. But let me just show you. It's not going to stay white. Hopefully it doesn't get tagged before we do this. But it's not going to stay that way. Instead, we just approved a design last week, and we're coordinating a date in the kind of the coming weeks and months with an artist group. They're going to kind of do a paint by color. But here's our design, and we can show up that we're going to paint on that wall. All right, I'll get out of the way. But it's going to be sweet. I have no artistic ability. That's why I found a friend that he's an artist, and I'm like, could you do this? He's like, yeah, I know some guys. He's like, I'm part of an art collective. I was like, what does that even mean? I have no idea. But they're going to come and help us do this, and it's just another way to show we love our community, to just make this place pop and do something different on 40 years of dirt of turning into something beautiful. So thank you guys for all your faithfulness in that. Well, today, as Scott said, we are kind of starting a new old series. Last year, we started this series, Love Songs, going through the book of Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, if you know. And we got through about 3 weeks, and then COVID hit real bad. And then when COVID hit in last March, we literally started this series on Valentine's Day weekend last year. We stopped and we went online. But kind of a little refresher, or if you weren't joining us before, this book kind of follows a couple. And it starts with the attraction phase. They catch each other's eye. Then they start dating. It gets serious. Eventually an engagement happens. And then we left off with, we got this couple married. And today we come to sex. Are you so excited that you came today? I heard one person said, yeah. They're very enthusiastic. It was definitely a dude. But today we get to talk about sex. And there's a reason we stopped this series a year ago, because I didn't want to talk to sex to a camera while you're sitting next to your kids. Like, I didn't want to sit next to my 2- and 4-year-old and we're like, we're not having this conversation right now. What's happening? But so we put it on pause, but we're bringing this back. And man, I'm excited because we're gonna have some fun with this today. But I want to just tell you, over the last year, I actually wrote this sermon and then just like filed it away in my computer and was like, I might never get to preach this. But it had always been kind of on the back of my mind. It's like, am I ever going to get to preach this? And then as we decided this is coming, and we had some few months as we prepped, I was like, you know what? I need to re-engage this thought. And I need to not just read commentaries, but I need to just, really embrace this topic. And I got some news to share with you. So behind me, there's a picture, and this will be coming up right here. That is an ultrasound of my wife's stomach. So I'm kind of an expert. That's all I gotta say. No, I'm just kidding. But this is the third kid, and I think I'm done after this. But we're really excited about this and coming along. But as we kind of come into this topic of sex, and we just need to kind of get some feelings out, right? We just need to kind of move past, because it's an awkward topic. And let me say some words, okay? These are the way it's referred to: the art of lovemaking, fornication, coitus, procreation, intimacy, doing it, whatever you want to call it. The Bible has a lot to say about it. And you see, this is a topic that affects all of us to one degree or another. If you didn't know, that's why you're here, right? You resulted from that. And why we need to talk about it and why it's so important is because currently we're in a culture where we have more access and we have more communication of sexual content than we've probably ever had before. Just think about it on your mobile device. Man, we are just bombarded with it. There is so much access to it. And when you freaking drive down the street, when you go to the store, wherever you are, we are bombarded with this communication that all talks about sex. But here's the problem. At the core of it, that message is godless. And at the core of it, this gift that we're going to talk about from God, when left unchecked, can lead to destruction and can lead to a lot of hurt in people's lives. So today, as we begin to kind of break this apart, and as we talk about this, we're going to kind of peel back on some of these layers. Because here's the second problem of it. The one problem is our world and the way it communicates. The second problem is often how our church talks about sex. And you know how our church usually talks about sex? We don't, right? You're like, we'll talk about that later. Like, Song of Solomon, like, we're going to skip that book. I saw a tweet recently, and it's like, I've been going to church for about 10 years, and they say they preach through everything in the Bible, but I've never heard a sermon on Song of Solomon. I'm like, come to our church this week, you'll get it. But so often we're like, I don't know if I want to talk about that, but God has a lot to say about it. So today, as we dive in, let me give you a key thought that's going to kind of guide us. And this is from our passage today, but really kind of from Scripture as a whole. And it is this, that God's design for sex is that it would be hot and it would be holy. All right? And this is kind of this balancing act. That God's design for sex is it be hot and it be holy. You're already getting so uncomfortable. You're like, this is not going to go good. My wife's going to leave mid-sermon. But if you have your Bible, go ahead and flip to Song of Songs, chapter 4. And in Song of Songs, chapter 4, we are going to break this down, and we're going to see kind of how this couple walks through this beautiful gift from God. Now, if you're anything like me, and whenever I throw out stuff like this, my question always in my mind is how? So when we say God's design is that it be hot and holy, my first question is, well, how do we have hot and holy sex, right? You're like, okay, I'm more uncomfortable. So first, let's tackle the first part of that, is how do we have hot sex? And this is the question we're going to ask. How do we have hot sex? And we got to ask this the right way for both the man and the woman, okay? All right. You're like, we're going there. I'm equal opportunity. It's all good. I'm telling you, it's going to get way worse, but we're going to walk this in a God-honoring way, I promise. Chapter 4, Song of Songs. Let's dive in right away to verse 1. It starts with a man, and this is Solomon talking. He says this, "How beautiful you are, my darling. How very beautiful. Behind your veil, your eyes are doves." Now, a little kind of background here, she's wearing a veil. Most commentators say because this is their wedding night. They just got married in the previous chapter, so she's wearing a veil. And in that time, they wear a veil for special occasions. So this is probably on their honeymoon or right after their wedding. It is their night right here that they're about to go into some stuff. Keep going in verse 1. He says, "Your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilead." Now, guys, if you need to learn how to compliment your wife, just say, "Hey, you remind me of a flock of goats." That's a good line there. You're like, what in the world does that mean? Well, typically in Jewish culture, women wore their hair up. So she lets her hair down, and it's flowing like goats down a mountain, okay? And it almost reminds me, speaking of godless messages about sex, of an episode of Friends. And there's an episode of Friends where Ross and Monica's cousin comes to visit, and every scene she lets her hair down, and it goes in slow motion. And I think that's what Solomon's seeing right here. He looks at his bride, she's letting her hair down, he's like, psh, those goats are streaming down. Okay, keep going, verse 2. "Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn sheep coming up from the washing, each bearing twins, and none has lost its young." Translation, you got all your teeth, girl, and you look good, right? I know some dentists that would share Solomon's love for teeth here. All right, verse 3. "Your lips are like a scarlet cord, and your mouth is lovely. Behind your veil, your brow is like a slice of pomegranate." He continues to move down. He starts at the top, and he's moving down. Just a little spoiler alert. Verse 4, "Your neck is like the Tower of David, constructed in layers. 1,000 shields are hung on it, all of them shields of warriors." Have you ever complimented your significant other's neck before? All right. Solomon knows what he's doing here. But you're like, again, why? Well, okay, here, most in this type of culture they were in, women usually did not have a lot of confidence. And really, it was a very male-dominated culture in many ways, and the Bible bucks that trend in a lot of fashions. But women usually had their head down when they walk. But she has confidence. Her neck is up straight, her shoulders back, and he's like, girl, I like your confidence. And he's complimenting her character and not just her looks. This dude is a genius. All right, verse 5. You ready? Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lily until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Listen to Solomon, I will make my way to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. He noticed her breasts and he compliments them. He starts talking about him. He actually gives them a name. One he calls a mountain, one he calls a hill. Yeah, aren't mountains usually bigger than hills? Okay, we're not going to go there. Verse 7, we're going to keep moving. You are absolutely beautiful, my darling. There is no imperfection in you. Hey, here's our first point in how to have hot sex. Step 1, it begins outside the bedroom. Notice here, Solomon hasn't touched her. They were even to the bedroom, and I believe, because we're going to see that in a second. But this is all about him describing her beauty. He's giving words of affirmation. He's writing a love song off the cuff describing how much he loves her and he wants her. Now, I don't know about you, but I try to make up songs all the time. Usually it's to my kids. I'm like, Aria and Archer, it's time for bed. We gotta go sleep so you don't get a headache. I don't know. But usually they're dumb and not funny, and my wife tells me to stop singing, so does my kids. But Solomon here just like breaks out and just like writes a song on his wedding night, like as he's looking at her. I'm like, this dude's a genius. I don't know how he's doing it. But he's describing her. He's looking at her. He's building that intimacy. He's building that care. He's like, not only her character is important, but he's communicating all his feelings to her. Now, why is this so important? Well, when you talk about kind of men and women, it's often been said that men are like microwaves and women are like crock pots. What do I mean by that? Okay. When is a man ready to have sex? Always, anytime, anywhere. Just say yes, right? When is a woman? It's a little more complicated than that. Usually, it takes some time, and it's not the same thing. Men are just wired differently. They have 2,000 times the amount of testosterone in their body. That's just biological facts. So men, honestly, sex is just going through the mind in some form or fashion in ways that is just not the same between sexes. That's why, you can make something sexual. It's like, that's how Michael Scott got started. That's why he said that's what she said about everything. It just is facts, right? We see that. It's a different type. God wired us a little bit differently. But here's what Solomon knew. That long before you make a move, you build intimacy. And you do this not just with actions, but with words. Now, I bet you if we took a poll today asking what is the hottest or what is the sexiest thing your husband does, wives in here and women in here, wouldn't it be like, oh, it's, when he gets out of the shower, right? Yeah, that's not the case. Or when he lifts weights. My wife would never say that because I don't lift any weights. But it would be more of like when he takes care of the kids. Or when make dinner, or clean up after dinner, or surprises and goes cleans my car and goes get a car wash and gets gas and is waiting for me. I'm really convicting myself. I got to start doing some of this stuff now. But it's like of acts of love, is writing a note, is sending a meaningful text, or having a conversation. It's not about the looks, guys. Otherwise, we're all in some big trouble. But it's about the words and the actions of love. And you see, Solomon shows this. Daniel Aiken, a pastor, says it this way, that love is a beautiful 4-letter word. I'm not stopping there. Sometimes spelled T-I-M-E, time, or T-A-L-K, talk. You see, the time and the talking that Solomon invests here continues. He just builds here. This is how he starts everything. And I just kind of want to give a time out. Men, if you feel like you're failing here, 1, stop failing. But 2, know that we're all in this together. It's something I struggle with constantly of like, how can I be a better spouse? Because so often we think of other things or we get busy or we're like, hey, let's go. But we don't take the time to invest in love like we should. But you see these words, these actions, this intimacy, it builds, it keeps moving forward. In step 2, it progresses with passion. Check out verse 8. Here, Solomon he lays this foundation. He gives these words of affirmation. He describes her beauty. And verse 8, he says, "Come with me from Lebanon, my bride, come with me from Lebanon, descend from the peak of Amana, from the summit of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of the lepers. You have captured my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captured my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace." Verse 10, "How delightful your caresses are." This is getting serious. "My sister, my bride, your caresses are much better than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume than any balsam. Your lips drip sweetness like the honeycomb, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon." You see, now that the mood is set in the first 7 verses, the physical touch starts. Now, let me address one little weird thing that it says here, and you're like, read it, and you're like, say what? He calls her his sister. And you're like, that's awkward, and that seems weird. That's not okay nowadays. But this literally wasn't his sister. Actually, in that culture, that word could be translated a different couple ways. And when he uses it, it means one that they have affection for. And more to that, affection for and a friendship with. So he was saying, you're not just my lover, you're not just my wife, but you're my friend. He's saying there's something that goes beyond just the physical. And you actually counteract this as we just got out of a series through the book of Esther. Esther was married to King Xerxes, a pagan Persian king, and he called her every couple of months when he wanted to into his bedroom. Not going to give details there, and then he sent her away. Like there was no friendship there. There was no kind of intimacy in something deeper besides the physical. But here we see with Solomon that he loved her as his friend, but also as his spouse. It goes deeper. But then he moves here from just words describing her as he gazes at her, and then he's kind of telling her, let's go. It's time to get to business, right? He's saying, we're going to go, come with me from Lebanon. He grabs his wife and he's like, to the bedroom we go. And he describes her touch. He describes the taste of her lips. He describes the smell of her garments. And 2 interpretations there. One, he's either close enough to smell her garments. My interpretation is he's smelling her garments as he's taking them off, okay? I'm just saying, because what we're about to go to, that's my preferred little detail there. But as all this stuff happens, it's heating up at an alarming rate. And I feel like this is where I don't need to commentate on what's happening, right? This is progressing. This is passionate. There's start to move here. And it all goes to our 3rd step. We've talked about how do we have hot sex for both the man and the woman. Well, it begins outside the bedroom. It progresses with passion. And then it flows to and it finishes with fulfillment. Look at verse 15 of chapter 4. He says, "You are a garden spring, a well of flowing water streaming from Lebanon." And then she responds, "Awaken, north wind. Come, south wind. Blow on my garden. Spread the fragrance of its spices. Let my love come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits." The man responds, "I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with my spices. I eat my honeycomb with my honey. I drink my wine with my milk." Wow. All right. This is where we stop. No, I'm just kidding. Why did I preach this? I don't know. There are a few different interpretations here, how you can read this. Some say that certain body parts are referred to here, like of actually people. Some say it's more general. But here's what's happening, is they consummate the marriage. They have sex. They do it, okay? This is what happens here is boom, they have it. Now, this word, I don't know if you've ever heard it or maybe you heard it from your grandpa or something like consummating a marriage. You're like, wow, that goes way back. But this term refers to the first physical act of sexual intercourse after a marriage. Now, it's actually interesting to note this still means something today because there's some states that if a marriage is never consummated, it can actually be annulled and it's void. Little tip for you. But not only are there legal applications here, but there are spiritual applications. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But here we see of the whole book of Song of Songs, of all 9 of these chapters, this is literally the high point, the climax of the entire song and of this book. But here's the deal. I skipped over a few verses. And that's exactly what our world does too. Because we're going to come back and read these verses in a second, but so often our world reads this and sees sex this way, and it skips a little part of it. And you see, I just did 3 things that our world, and there could be like an article on Cosmo that would probably agree with this, of like, how do you have hot sex? Oh, it begins outside the bedroom, it progresses with passion, and then it finishes with fulfillment. Yeah, that sounds great, that's fantastic. And our world would agree with that. But see, there's a point of that that's missing out. And what we see in the Song of Songs and throughout the Bible is God gave us his gift of sex, but it's a 2-sided coin. Not only is it a physical act, but it's also a spiritual act. And you see, we said that sex, God's design is that it be hot, but does anyone remember what the other one was? All right, so let's talk and let's say, how do we have holy sex that honors God? Well, you see, this was actually written, this book, this song, in about the 10th century BC, so about 3,000 years ago. And an interesting fact here is that every other ancient document from this time that was written about sex would only do so in talking about procreation. That's like the only use for it, is like, right? To make babies and populate the earth. That was the point of it. But God here has never been squeamish about sex. And God created sex for enjoyment as a gift, but God also as an act that honors God. So here's the first one, is how can sex be holy and honor God? Well, number 1 is it prepares until the proper time. Check out verse 12. He says, "My sister, my bride, you are a locked garden, sealed spring." You see, many commentators read this that they are both virgins on their wedding night, and they have waited for this moment. Now, many read this today and say, that sounds ridiculous. Like, that sounds outdated. That sounds crazy. Why is waiting on marriage even matter? Well, let's break down marriage for a second, especially talking from a biblical lens, is that marriage is not just a contract. Marriage is not just a legal document, but it is a covenant. A covenant is actually referred to throughout Scripture as a binding spiritual agreement, either between people and God or just between God. In a marriage here, as we see through Scripture, was a binding spiritual agreement between a man and a woman and God. So you see, this is kind of a big deal. And we're going to get into this in a second a little more, but a covenant, let's give a little background on here. In the Old Testament, every time a covenant was made, there was a shedding of blood. That's why if we fast forward to the New Testament, when Jesus came and he had to die on a cross, he had to die. He had to shed his blood for the covenant between us and God to be restored. There needed to be a blood sacrifice. And Jesus was the perfect sacrifice that atoned that forever. But then when we take that into marriage, you see God's perfect design is God tells us that a man and a woman should leave their father, they should leave their mother, and they should forsake them. They should become together and become one flesh. Now, so what is sex? Well, you see, sex is the outward sign of an inward covenant that you are united as one person. And in God's perfect design is that a virgin man and a virgin woman would come together at one point into this spiritual covenant after being married, and there would be a shedding of blood that seals that covenant for the first time. You tracking with me? All right, I know that's the lot there. But that's why I'm saying there's a holy component to this. And if you're feeling a little shame, don't, because we're going to get somewhere, I promise. Don't get discouraged here. But this is how God set it up. And that's why it's so important that sex isn't just about a biblical or physical pleasure, but in a very real sense, every time you have sex with your spouse, you are renewing your covenant to one another. You see, overall, this is why we need to be careful in how the church and us communicate sex. because we get two very different messages a lot in our world. And I'm someone, I grew up in the church, so I kind of heard some of this, but I heard two different messages. Our world says, go, 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 go. Go explore, go have fun, go search sites, go meet that girl, go meet that dude, go do whatever you want, go have fun, explore. You don't know you don't like it until you try it. I know I don't like some things, okay? I don't need to try everything. I know I don't like dog poop, okay? I'm not going to try it. We got friends who do it in high school, but that's just because they're dumb. But our world says, go, go, go and explore. And then the church says, no, 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 not until you're married. And so going through the mind of everyone who goes to church, we're confused. So then we either hear go, 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 or we hear no, no, no. And then we get into a marriage, and if we go, 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 we go into marriage with a bunch of baggage and a bunch of shame and a bunch of crap we got to work through. Now, I want to tell you, you can still work through that crap, but you got to know that you're taking it with you. Or on the flip side, when we hear no, 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 we finally get married, and then we're like, is this right? Are we allowed to do this? Because this feels weird. Like, let's not talk about this. Is there like certain ways we got to do this? And we know nothing about sex. We have no idea when the church should be saying, wait, 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 wait. Because it's a beautiful gift from God, but it's better when we do it in His proper design. Now, you may be hearing this and you think, if you're either in person or online, you may be hearing this and think, that's old-fashioned. That's outdated. That's unrealistic. That's crazy. Like waiting until marriage to have sex, are you crazy? But as much as our world loves to celebrate this, I'd encourage you to do some digging. Do some digging into actually the hurt and the loneliness that comes around with it. There's a show that I watch through. I'm a sitcom junkie, okay? And mostly because it's something my wife will watch with me, because anything that has violence in it or like is scary, she's like, nah, I ain't doing it. So we watch a lot of sitcoms, and one we watched through was How I Met Your Mother, and it's a funny sitcom, godless message about sex. But one of the characters, Barney, his whole goal is to hook up with women. And it's funny because at the end of the show, he actually gets married to one of the other leading characters. But a lot of people got mad that the show ended with, eventually their marriage fell apart. He went back to that former lifestyle. And they actually, I think, really honestly showed him at it as a dude who was pretending like he was awesome and had it all together, but was lonely and wanting something more. Mark Manson is a secular leadership guy who writes books about this. In one of his books, he talks about the joy in when he got married after living a life full of lust and debauchery, how that commitment changed everything. And you see, our world celebrates just go and do whatever you want, have sex, go look at pornography, go crazy. But there is so much baggage and emptiness and a void in our life that never truly fills. And you see here, when we see this, that God is saying that we don't want you to wait because we want you to miss out, but because in order to use this gift in the proper context. But you see, not only do we simply see sex as a hot physical act, but a holy spiritual one, we see that it also takes pleasure in giving oneself to their partner. Now, go to verse 13, because these are, again, the verses we skipped. And we're going to read the end again here. But I want to see some of the verses that lead up to it. We said it needs to wait until the proper time. But then check out verse 13. It says, your branches are a paradise of pomegranates with choicest fruits. Henna with nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all the best spices. Verse 15, you are a garden spring, a well of flowing water, streaming from Lebanon. Verse 16, awaken north wind, come south wind, come blow on my garden, spread the fragrance of its spices. Let my love come to its garden, eat its choicest fruit. And then again he responds, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with spices. I eat my honeycomb with honey. I drink my wine with milk. Now, again, I'm not going to go into details here, but I want to make one more observation about the end of this passage and kind of what leads up to it is there's an unselfishness. It's not about, hey, let's do it so I can get pleasure. Let me take. But it's about how can I give to my spouse. And they both aren't focused on themselves, aren't focused on what they want. Instead, they're asking and they're telling and saying, hey, no, you give. No, like, they're giving back to each other. And there's this unselfish nature here as they're performing this act. Now, here's the bottom line I want to get to today. Because you're like, this is a lot to try to process right now. The bottom line is that when we follow God's design for sex, it brings enjoyment to us and honor to God. Listen to how this section closes out. In the second half of verse 1 of chapter 5, a narrator pops in. And the narrator's actually been here throughout it. And that narrator represents God's voice speaking into their marriage. And listen to this. This is when they're having sex. Is this like, you might feel a little squeamish about this, that God's talking during this moment. But this is what God says. Eat, friends, drink, be intoxicated with caresses. What does God say? Have fun, keep doing it. Hashtag that's in the Bible. That's pretty cool, right? He says, keep having sex. He said, in this environment, in this structure, God condones it. God gives a thumbs up. God gives a word of affirmation and says, go crazy, right? And he's telling us that if you're married, go for it. Now, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not. Well, maybe if you're single today and you want to be married one day, here's what encouragement is: keep preparing yourself to be the person who can be a part of a marriage like that. I had coffee a little while ago with a guy, and I loved what he said. He's like, a girl caught my eye. And I was like, that's anytime a dude is like really motivated for something, usually there's a girl behind it, right? We're trying to impress for some reason. And he's like, and I met this girl. He's like, and I don't even know if I like just was necessarily infatuated with her, but just a girl like her that had these qualities, that had this awesomeness. And I changed and I quit stuff that I didn't like because I wanted to one day be with a girl like that. And so often we're like, I'm sick of I not being able to get a girl like that, or I'm sick of only attracting dudes who are losers and who are boys and need to grow up. Well, sometimes we need to look in the mirror and say, what am I putting off? How am I presenting myself? Am I preparing myself for the person that I want out there? And sometimes God is calling us saying, what do I need to give up in my life? And this happens in marriage continually too, is what do I need to take out of my life to be the best person for God and for my spouse and my future one? And then also along with that is if you're single and you're thinking that, is to commend you to keep yourself pure and away from the sexual garbage of the world around us. Because I just want to say again, as we've seen here, that God's design for sex is good. I promise you. But let's be honest here. Our world doesn't really follow this design on a grand scale. Our communities don't follow this on a grand scale. And if we're honest, probably many in this room and watching online have missed the boat in some way and not followed this design. Let me give a little reality check, and this is the last point I'm going to kind of close out with today, is that when we fail to follow God's design for sex, it leaves us broken and in need of grace. But it doesn't stop there. Listen to this last part. Which God has in abundance. Here's what might be happening right now. You might be listening to this, and there might be some guilt. There might be some shame. There might be something in you be like, that's not how I did it. Maybe you're married and be like, we didn't build our marriage on that foundation. We screwed up. Or maybe we still have issues unresolved in our marriage that we aren't addressing, and there's some guilt prying at you. Or maybe you're sitting next to a girlfriend or boyfriend and watching this online, and you're like bunnies in spring. But you see, here's what we need to realize, and here's what's happening is despite that, despite the brokenness, maybe we haven't been pure, maybe we've missed the boat, we all need to understand that when we talk about a holy sexual life, that it's not us that does that. What do I mean? Well, who makes things holy? Is it you? Is it me? It's not us. It's God and God alone. Only Jesus Christ can make things holy. 2 Corinthians 5:17, one of my favorite verses, says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, listen to this, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and see, the new has come. See, I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you're doing. Jesus can literally change all of it. And when Jesus touches anything, he makes it holy. You follow his ministry. He touched lepers, they were cleansed. He put mud on a dude's eyes, he could see that was blind. Jesus changes everything. And no matter what baggage you're holding on to, maybe you aren't a virgin anymore, maybe you haven't been pure, maybe you've been unfaithful in your marriage, Jesus can change it all. And Jesus has something better to offer than our world does. I just want to encourage you today, no matter where you're at, if you're married and you're in a godly marriage, go forth, honor God, have sex. It's great. Go have fun and live in that gift. Go make babies. It makes our church attendance go up. That's what I'm just trying to do my part, right? But it's like, go and enjoy that gift that God has given for you. And if you're not in that boundaries, ask hey God, what can I do to realign? How can I get back into your design, into your will, so that one day I can enjoy this gift as you intended? Let's pray.